And now it's time for another Dice Tower review with Mike Vincent.
So now looking at the event cards, these two I feel are also ones that could be compared as they have very similar functions. So they both have one cost. There are 2 copies of each cards in the core set, and again, I wouldn't mind having more of these cards, particularly a Test of Will. So let's start with Hasty Stroke, which reads, response, cancel a shadow effect just triggered during combat. And we have a Test of Will, which reads, cancel the when revealed effects of a card that was just revealed from the encounter deck. So being able to cancel shadow effects or when revealed effects is very handy. And as I mentioned, as this game goes on, there are some quests with some just brutal shadow effects and when revealed effects. So just being able to cancel those and not having to worry about them, I would recommend bringing these cards in almost any spirit deck, particularly if you know you're going to be against one of these quests with just nasty shadow effects or when revealed effects. Unlike Eleanor's ability, where you have to draw another card off the encounter deck, a Test of Will just let you cancel that card. It's done, and hopefully you only have to draw one more if you're playing with partners. So I feel that both of these cards are excellent. I've used them many times, and anytime me or my wife are playing a spirit deck, we almost always include a Test of Will and Heavy Stroke, and at the very least, Test of Will. But we've found as this game has gone on, and with some of the more recent expansions, the shadow effects can be really devastating. So both of these cards, fantastic. So here we see a Light in the Dark. There are 2 copies of this card in the core set. It has a cost of 2 and reads, action, choose an enemy engaged with a player, return that enemy to the staging area. So this can be a very handy card. As I mentioned before, if you're playing a dynamic where one of the players is focused on questing and the other player is focused on combat, this can be a good way to bail out the questing player if they accidentally or somehow have to engage with a nasty enemy. There's enough brutal enemies in this game that being able to send them back to the staging area and not have to take an attack from them, especially if your heroes unexpectedly had to be exhausted and you don't have anyone to defend, this can be a very nice backup. So this might not be a card you always bring, but I think if you're playing an encounter with some really nasty enemies with lots of attack, or if you have that dynamic where one player is combat focused and the other player is questing focused, then a Light in the Dark can be a good way to bail out that questing focused player. So yeah, a Light in the Dark. So here we see Dwarven Tomb, has a cost of 1 and reads, action, return 1 spirit card from your discard pile to your hand. There's 1 copy of this card in the core set, and again, I wish there was more of these. This is an excellent card. It's just so cheap and so versatile. There are so many good cards in the Spirit Sphere, whether it's a Test of Will and you want to cancel the when revealed effects, or if you have a good ally who's died and you want to bring them back. Perhaps you've lost your Northern Tracker and you really need to make some progress on locations in the staging area. It's nice to just be able to take any card that you've used, whether it's a really powerful event card or an ally, and just bring them back into your hand. So for a cost of 1, I feel like Dwarven Tomb is an excellent card and worth including in almost any spirit deck that you're going to be playing. So now we're looking at Fortune or Fate. It has a very high cost of 5, but when you read the ability, you'll see why. Action, choose a hero in any player's discard pile, put that card into play under its owner's control. So essentially, this allows you to bring one of your heroes back to life. A really good card. Yes, it is expensive, but if you're playing a very combat heavy quest where you're going to be losing heroes, and especially in the context of the new Black Riders expansion, when you consider that if your hero dies, you're not allowed to play them for the rest of the campaign. If you're playing campaign mode, then I feel Fortune or Fate suddenly has gained a lot more use. It's very nice to, if you have a really crucial hero that you want to play through the entire Black Riders campaign through, and they die, well, here's one way you can get them back. There aren't that many cards that allow you to resurrect a hero, and so Ideally, I try to build my deck so that I'm not losing heroes. I feel if my deck is constructed properly, I'm able to deal with the encounter cards to the point where hopefully I don't have heroes dying. But when you're first starting and you haven't quite learned how to deck build properly, if you find that your heroes are dying somewhat regularly, or if you just have a really nasty quest with some brutal enemies who are killing your heroes, this is one way you can get them back. It's expensive, but certainly if you're playing an all-spirit deck and you have 3 spirit heroes, then you should be able to generate 5 resources over a turn or 2. So yeah, certainly a powerful card, which used in the right situation is very good. So here we see a card that's somewhat similar to Fortune or Fate, and that is Stand and Fight. It has a cost of X, so when we read the action, choose an ally with a printed cost of X in any player's discard pile. Put that ally into play under your control. The chosen ally can belong to any sphere of influence. Yeah, so this is a great card. I think the first thing that comes to mind might be Gandalf. If you've played Gandalf already and he's in your discard pile or your partner's discard pile, it's a way to recycle him and use his amazing abilities. So yeah, I think Stand and Fight is very good. If you have a crucial ally that you just want to bring back, then I think this is a card worth including. It's not one that I always include by default, but given the right scenario or depending on the deck that you're going for, if you really find you're going to need a powerful ally like a Gandalf, or if you have a more expensive one like Gildor and Glorian or Beorn or Faramir, and you lose them, then this can be an easy way to get them back. So there we have Stand and Fight. So now looking at Strength of Will, it has a cost of 0, so it's free to play, and reads response: after you travel to a location, exhaust a spirit character to place 2 progress tokens on that location. So I think this is a very good card in that it's free, and putting 2 progress on a location is either going to explore it or get you very close to exploring it. I think it's nice because it says character, so it doesn't have to be a hero. That way, if you've held back a chump blocker, or if you have an ally who's not doing much this turn, you can exhaust them to place 2 progress. Or perhaps if you have a hero like Dunhere or a hero like Eleanor, and you didn't have to attack anyone in the staging area or didn't have to cancel any when revealed effects this turn, then they're going to be readied and could be candidates to activate this card. So yeah, being able to put 2 progress on a location I think is very nice, and it's free, so Strength of Will, certainly a useful card. So here we see the Galadriels Greeting. It has a cost of 3 and reads action: reduce one player's threat by 6, or reduce each player's threat by 2. This is another fantastic card, and I can't even tell you how many times this card has been a lifesaver. Now, given that you're dead when your threat reaches 50, being able to reduce one player's threat by 6 is amazing. Considering too that this could prevent some nasty enemies from engaging with you, the Galadriels Greeting is just a very versatile card. There are 2 copies of this in the core set, and I highly recommend including both of these cards in a spirit deck. Whether you play it on yourself or on your partner, I find there's always cards that are driving up your threat, and so this is a really nice way to get it back down. If you're playing with 3 or 4 players, then being able to reduce everyone's threat can make it worth it. But more often than not, I find we're using reducing one player's by 6 as opposed to each player by 2. But you have that option if you're both getting very high, or if you both need to reduce your threat somehow. So it's a bit pricey at a cost of 3, but I feel the effect is well worth the cost. Yeah, amazing card. So as we mentioned, Spirit, they're very good at reducing threat. And so if you have, again, that dynamic where one player is trying to do lots of questing and keep their threat low, and the other player is trying to do all the combat, then for the character who's trying to make sure their threat is low, being able to reduce it by 6 is crucial. So a fantastic card. And we're now looking at our last card for the Spirit cards, and this is Will of the West. It has a cost of 1 and reads action: choose a player, shuffle that player's discard pile back into his deck. So to be honest, this is not a card that I often end up playing. I find running out of cards in my deck is not a problem I often encounter. However, I could see that if your deck includes a lot of card draw, or if you're making heavy use of a card like the Sigil Miner, which requires you to discard off the top of your deck, that Will of the West could come in handy. So this is where I'm going to make a call out. I'd be curious to hear in the comments, if you play this game, how often you include Will of the West in your decks, and do you find that this is a card that you use a lot of? So for me, it's not a card that I've used very often. I almost never find I make it usually even halfway through my decks, maybe 3/4 if it's a longer quest. So I find I often don't include this one, but in the right deck, and depending on how often you're drawing cards or how often you're discarding cards, I could see a use for Will of the West. So there you have the Spirit cards for the core set. I feel that the Spirit Sphere in the core set has a lot of really good cards, and I feel particularly if you're playing in partners, you want to include Spirit in there. They're just so good at questing, and being able to reduce threat is such an important mechanic in this game that I feel that Spirit is probably a front runner for one of the best spheres in the core set. Not that the other ones aren't useful, but that it's so crucial being able to make so much progress. And some of their cards are really good. Being able to cancel when revealed effects, or being able to resurrect heroes is something that only Spirit can really do at this point. So a fantastic sphere. I think you might run into problems if you're playing solo, as combat is certainly not a specialty of theirs. So you might run into having a hard time dealing with enemies if you're playing a solo Spirit at the beginning. But if you're playing in partners, you're probably going to have at least some representation of Spirit in there. So yeah, very good. Thank you very much for watching. We'll finish next week by looking at the lore cards, and I might do a short video looking at the neutral cards as well, although there are less of those. So yeah, thanks very much. If you have any comments that you'd like to leave, I'd be very curious to hear if you have any clever ways that you'd like to use any of these cards. And certainly if you disagree with any of my assessments, which many of you will, I'm sure, I'd be curious to hear what you have to say. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week for a look at the lore sphere.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.